The streets of America echo with an unsettling quiet, shattered only by the voices of those trapped in homelessness and addiction. For generations, we've ignored the anguish unfolding right outside our homes. Neighborhoods are unraveling, consumed by an unending loop of poverty and substance abuse, with few chances for escape. As families fight to endure, we must ask ourselves, how did we allow it to reach this point? And what steps can we take to halt this destruction before it steals more lives? The devastating reality of homelessness and addiction in America. Homelessness in America is no longer an issue limited to a handful of individuals. It has escalated into a nationwide emergency impacting millions across the nation. The population living without stable housing keeps climbing, driven by factors like skyrocketing rents, inadequate access to affordable health care, and deep-rooted shortcomings in mental health systems. Yet the most heartbreaking element of this crisis lies in the destructive bond between homelessness and addiction.
Oh, that is crazy feeling, and it's not a fun feeling at all. When you wake up, you get very sick, because it sucks all the drugs out of you, so you have nothing.
In countless vulnerable communities across the country, substance abuse acts as both a trigger and a result of homelessness. Narcotics such as heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl have overtaken entire neighborhoods, ensnaring people in a relentless cycle where breaking free from addiction is as daunting as leaving the streets. Addiction often complicates efforts to secure and sustain housing without stable shelter. The stress, isolation, and lack of support that feed addiction intensify. These communities burdened by both homelessness and the fentanyl epidemic have turned into centers of deep suffering, where people are left to survive alone, lacking the help required to escape. While local governments and charities have attempted to tackle these challenges, the scope of the problem is immense, and many measures have fallen short or offered only brief relief. The truth is unsettling. Whole neighborhoods are being abandoned, overlooked by a system that struggles to keep pace with the scale of the crisis. Thus, the pressing question remains, is it possible to turn back the rising tide of homelessness and addiction in America? To grasp the full magnitude of this emergency, we must look closely at the places where homelessness and addiction are most concentrated. Let's now explore the top 5 cities shouldering the weight of this growing national disaster. Skid Row, Los Angeles, California. Skid Row in Los Angeles stands as an enduring emblem of America's homelessness emergency. Situated in the center of downtown, this district shelters over 400 individuals in improvised tents and temporary housing, with many more sleeping along the streets. The chilling truth of Skid Row lies not only in the sheer volume of unhoused residents, but in the entrenched link between addiction and homelessness that makes this place uniquely tragic. Substance abuse, particularly involving methamphetamine and fentanyl, isn't just a byproduct of street life in Skid Row. It's a driving force behind the crisis, deepening the suffering and making escape nearly unattainable. Sidewalks are scattered with used syringes, drug debris, and evidence of a relentless cycle that holds people captive in mere survival.
Well, Skid Row is like, it's a trap. Even though they have resources to help you, but it's a trap because it's a lot of the world going on out here, as in drugs and prostitution and partying. And if you get caught up in that stuff, it could ruin your life. You know, and I came down here and unfortunately I got involved in it. and it took me to destruction.
Addiction intensifies the harsh realities of homelessness, while the absence of stable housing and safety exacerbates addiction even further. It's a brutal feedback loop, homelessness and addiction feeding on each other, with scarce resources to disrupt it. In Skid Row, surviving means more than securing a place to rest. It's about clinging to life in a society that has turned away. Why does Skid Row persist as the epicenter of this crisis? The reasons are painfully obvious. Systemic breakdowns in affordable housing, a lack of adequate mental health and addiction treatment, and fragmented support networks. Programs like Home for All have achieved limited success in offering short-term aid, but they fail to tackle the underlying issues. Municipal responses have been inconsistent and without sustainable strategies. Skid Row remains a glaring reflection of America's flawed approach to homelessness and addiction. Unless we directly address root challenges, including skyrocketing housing costs and the dire shortage of mental health services, Skid Row will continue to symbolize a nation avoiding its greatest social emergencies. And the longer decisive action is delayed, the more deeply this crisis will entrench itself within our urban cores. Tenderloin, San Francisco, California. The Tenderloin neighborhood in San Francisco has long served as a stark mirror of the devastating convergence between homelessness and addiction in America. For decades, this compact but infamous district has been the epicenter of the opioid crisis, with fentanyl tearing through the community and leaving widespread destruction in its path. The pervasive grip of addiction saturates the streets where people confront their struggles openly, often in full view. From the used syringes scattered along the pavement to the hollow, distant gazes of those ensnared by drugs, Tenderloin embodies a painful reminder of a society that has failed to deliver help where it's most urgently needed.
It sucks. It sucks to not have a place to belong. It sucks to not have your city that you love want to take care of you. I love San Francisco. I love being here. I love living here. I've said before that, you know, my footprints are embedded in the streets of San Francisco. I am San Francisco. I mean, my footsteps tell a story, and I don't want them to be forgotten just because I'm homeless, just because I'm having a hiccup in my life.
Homelessness has become entrenched here, a fixture in the daily landscape. Rows of tents fill the sidewalks, and stopgap measures like the San Francisco Navigation Centers offer some respite, but these solutions are temporarily lagging behind the worsening situation. Despite local interventions, the unhoused population keeps climbing, fueled not only by economic struggles, but by the ever-looming presence of addiction, especially fentanyl. These are not merely people without shelter. They are individuals whose lives have been completely upended by a crisis spinning out of control. What makes Tenderloin's reality especially heartbreaking is the glaring absence of sustainable solutions. Although short-term assistance exists, it fails to confront the fundamental problems. Persistent shortages of affordable housing, limited mental health care, and overstretched addiction recovery systems. In a city as affluent as San Francisco, how can an entire neighborhood be left to endure such poverty and the wreckage of substance abuse? This mounting emergency poses a critical question. Can a city so prosperous and technologically advanced continue to neglect its most vulnerable citizens? Without a coordinated, lasting plan that integrates housing, addiction treatment, and mental health care, Tenderloin will remain a reflection of America's wider homelessness crisis, an urgent demand for action that can no longer be brushed aside. Mass and Cass, Boston, Massachusetts. Mass and Cass, often referred to as Methadone Mile in Boston's South End, has emerged as a devastating emblem of the collision between homelessness and addiction. Once a location where people sought methadone treatment, it has since evolved into a sprawling open-air drug market, attracting individuals addicted to heroin, fentanyl, and other opioids. This neighborhood now stands at the heart of the opioid crisis, where life on the streets is made even harder by the unrelenting presence of drugs and addiction. The conditions in Mass and Cass are alarming. Homelessness and addiction are so deeply intertwined that the area has grown increasingly unsafe. Unhoused individuals are often pulled into cycles of substance dependency with limited avenues for escape. The community is littered with used syringes and blanketed by a palpable sense of despair as attempts to address homelessness or offer treatment have yielded little progress. City officials and nonprofit groups have attempted to confront the situation through housing efforts and recovery programs, but these measures frequently fall short. The absence of a unified strategy has allowed Mass and Cass to deteriorate into a snapshot of America's larger homelessness and addiction challenges. Inadequate support for both those without homes and those struggling with addiction underscores the failure of the city's systems to tackle the root of these overlapping issues. What makes Mass and Cass especially tragic is how deeply rooted the crisis has become. Addiction here extends far beyond individual struggles. It is a collective problem embedded within the community itself. Without a fundamental shift in how homelessness and addiction are addressed, Mass and Cass will remain a stark reminder of the consequences when vulnerable neighborhoods are abandoned. Kensington, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Kensington, once a vibrant working-class community in Philadelphia, now stands as one of the most haunting representations of the convergence between homelessness and addiction in America. Situated in the northeastern section of the city, Kensington has gained its reputation due to its significant homeless population and the widespread open-air drug trade that has flourished in recent years. The streets of Kensington not only shelter thousands experiencing homelessness, but also act as a front line in the ongoing battle against the opioid crisis, especially heroin and fentanyl. According to recent estimates, the neighborhood is home to more than 1,000 people living outdoors or in abandoned buildings, many of whom face severe substance use disorders. The area is defined by a constant flow of men, women, and children moving through streets strewn with discarded needles, drug debris, and makeshift encampments. Despite the efforts of local groups and authorities to offer assistance, Kensington has become a reflection of the broader addiction and homelessness emergencies sweeping the nation. At the core of Kensington's plight is the opioid epidemic, which has hit the community with devastating force. Heroin and fentanyl use has surged at alarming levels, with overdoses frequently happening in broad daylight. Healthcare systems and treatment providers in the area are overwhelmed, struggling to meet the growing need for support. The relentless loop of addiction and homelessness continues to strain local resources and deepen the crisis, making recovery elusive for many. Why has Kensington emerged as such a focal point of this emergency? The explanation is complex. Its location near major transportation routes and its industrial legacy made it a strategic hub for drug distribution, attracting individuals seeking cheap shelter or temporary refuge. Furthermore, the shortage of accessible addiction care, combined with a housing market beyond reach for many, has left residents trapped in a punishing cycle of homelessness and substance abuse. Responses have included bolstering law enforcement, adding emergency beds, and launching programs designed to support addiction recovery. Yet progress has been limited, and critics argue these actions address only surface-level symptoms of a much deeper issue. Unless fundamental causes poverty, mental health challenges, and the lack of affordable housing are tackled head-on, solutions will remain inadequate. Cal Anderson Park, Seattle, Washington. In the center of Seattle's lively Capitol Hill, Cal Anderson Park was once a beloved sanctuary, a lush retreat where families gathered, children played, and the city's progressive energy flourished. Now it stands as a gut-wrenching emblem of America's homelessness crisis, a place where hope and despair collide beneath a patchwork of tents and tarps. Roughly 200 to 300 people now inhabit the park, their improvised shelters scattered across the formerly immaculate lawns. But it's not just the camps that cast a shadow over this space. It's the unrelenting grip of addiction that traps countless individuals in a waking nightmare. Fentanyl and methamphetamine have embedded themselves deeply into Cal Anderson Park, where used needles in the vacant eyes of those locked in addiction's grip paint a portrait of survival against impossible odds. Here, homelessness and substance abuse are not merely intertwined, they're entangled in a merciless cycle, each sustaining the other. Around 60% of the park's population struggles with addiction as fentanyl's lethal surge transforms the core of Capitol Hill into a... The park's diverse residents, including many from LGBTQ+ and BIPOC communities, face distinct hardships, their aspirations crushed by skyrocketing rents, limited mental health services, and systems that seem to have abandoned them. Seattle's approach. A patchwork of inadequate measures. The city's unified care team periodically clears encampments only for them to return days later, an endless loop that resolves nothing. Temporary shelters and outreach initiatives offer glimpses of hope, yet they pale in comparison to the overwhelming need. Affordable housing remains elusive in a city where tech-driven costs soar and treatment facilities are stretched beyond capacity, unable to meet demand. Cal Anderson Park has become more than a location. It's a reflection of America's inability to care for its most vulnerable. What makes this park's decline so devastating is the glaring contrast, a once progressive landmark, now a makeshift refuge where the American dream lies buried beneath refuse and sorrow. The pleas for help resonate powerfully here, amplified by the community's diversity and resilience, yet stifled by bureaucratic stagnation. Without sweeping, systemic reforms, expanded housing, strong addiction recovery infrastructure, and robust mental health support, Cal Anderson Park will remain a wound on Seattle's conscience, a testament to a nation adrift. The clock is ticking to change this trajectory before more lives are lost. Personal perspective, the root causes of homelessness and addiction. The ongoing crisis of homelessness and addiction in America is devastating, not only for the immense personal pain it inflicts, but also because it exposes deep structural failures that have been ignored for generations. As I look closely at these communities, Skid Row, Tenderloin, Mass, and Kensington, and Cal Anderson Park, the link between homelessness and addiction is undeniable. They are not separate problems, but part of an intricate network of societal neglect. Homelessness in America, in many instances, goes far beyond lacking a roof. It's about the absence of opportunity access to housing, healthcare, mental health services, and addiction recovery. Those trapped in this crisis often face a lifetime of systemic obstacles that make breaking free nearly unattainable. Affordable housing is scarce in countless urban centers, while addiction treatment programs are chronically underfunded or buckling under the weight of overwhelming demand. The outcome is a devastating cycle where homelessness fuels addiction and addiction reinforces homelessness. In my view, the roots of this crisis stem from decades of public policies that have failed to safeguard the most vulnerable. Soaring housing prices, stagnant earnings, and inadequate mental health and addiction care have all fueled the surge in homelessness. Simultaneously, the opioid epidemic has torn through communities, turning entire neighborhoods into open-air drug scenes and embedding addiction even deeper into society's fabric. Although various solutions have been suggested, from supervised consumption sites to expanded housing initiatives, the determination to enact sweeping structural change remains insufficient. Until we collectively acknowledge that homelessness and addiction are not moral shortcomings, but social challenges requiring empathy, decisive action, and comprehensive reform, the problem will only intensify. The solution is not simply to build more shelters. It requires confronting the fundamental causes of poverty, addiction, and mental illness, and creating genuine pathways to stability and recovery. Conclusion. Homelessness in America is a deep-seated crisis that reflects the core of the nation's principles and priorities. The plight of those living without shelter, from Skid Row to Tenderloin, Mass, and Cass, Kensington, and Cal Anderson Park, exposes systemic shortcomings in confronting the intertwined emergencies of housing and addiction. Although efforts have been made to ease the suffering of the unhoused, these neighborhoods remain locked in a relentless cycle of poverty, substance abuse, and hopelessness. The question persists: will the United States rise to meet these challenges with the urgency they so clearly require? Without a sweeping policy transformation and a true dedication to tackling both the immediate effects and underlying causes of homelessness and addiction, these communities will remain stark reminders of the cost of neglecting the vulnerable. The time to act is now, before these escalating crises claim even more lives.